it's an area that we want to speak on. My first question, and you know what? Testing. Oh, it works. Okay, so I'm just going to hand it to whoever's going to raise their hand to answer this. So now, I'm a parent, and I know nothing about eating disorders and all of this. I mean, so some people are very familiar with these things, but if I'm someone in the audience and I have no clue on how to even detect this, can you provide me with, first of all, what is really a definition, if you will, of what an eating disorder is, so they can be clear? It's a brief definition. Who wants to take that?
Well, there are different types of eating disorders. Is that what you're getting at?
So,
Is that what you're getting at? There's
yeah.
different types of eating disorders.
Well, I want to know, well, what is the eating disorder? I mean, what would you say would be a definition? And then we're going to talk about the different types.
Right. So when I think of the eating disorder, in my practice, I attach it to anxiety, some unrealistic view of your weight, your body, in unhealthy ways that you've begun to restrict intake of food and nutrition. That's a general overview.
Okay. And then give us a couple of them so that we kind of know. We talked about bulimia.
Right. If we're thinking of bulimia, we're thinking of the inappropriate binging and intake of food, and then expelling the food in different ways, whether it's sort of regurgitating or taking diet pills or things like that, sort of in an unhealthy way, and getting rid of the food from your body. Okay, so there's episodes of like binging and purging. And
so bulimia.
Right.
Now explain to us what's the difference between that. You go, you know where I'm going with this. What's the difference? There's bulimia. Okay, now what's the difference between that and say anorexia?
Anorexia. So anorexia, what you might not see sort of the binging and purging sort of aspect of it, but there is sort of a unrealistic view of your own body and how you look, and a restriction of food intake overall.
Okay, so then they're not eating.
Right.
Okay.
In bulimia, there are generally two different kinds of bulimia, where a woman or young girl is overeating excessively, binging, and then purging, throwing up or taking laxatives afterwards to relieve herself of, or himself, of the food that they engorged on. Okay? The anorexia can form in two different manifestations, and it's generally in a woman or girl that may be exercising fanatically and or starving herself and or both. But you'll see generally the anorexia is a young girl or woman that is thinner and restricting or over-exercising. And then you have women who just exercise but they don't restrict. And then you have women that are overeaters that just eat and eat and eat, and they don't binge or purge, and they don't go out and exercise, but they all manifest themselves in some type of disorder, so to say, in a way of dealing with control. It's a way that we are able to have control over our emotions, and food is usually used as a tool.
That's exactly what I wanted. Is that helpful? Because if you're someone who's just, you don't know these things. We don't know these things unless we are directly experiencing them. But if you were to have a child who was experiencing this or heading in that direction, you want to understand, what are the types.
If I can add to that, and if you see sort of symptoms like this, the difficult thing in mental health is that it can manifest very different in different people, right? So you can have someone who falls into this category, but you can't visually see it. That could be the window where you just talk to your doctor or introduce yourself to a therapist and talk about the symptoms you've seen. Sometimes we get into trouble if we try to sort of capture it ourselves. But you could start with a casual discussion with your doctor, your physician, and they can usually recommend you to a really good therapist who actually specializes in that. And I don't, but I know several. So.
Okay, great. So that was going to be my next question. If a parent feels as though their child is maybe heading in that direction, or even they themselves may be struggling, we know they're therapists, but are there organizations that you all know of, just generally, especially here in Charlotte, where people can turn? Is there a number that they can call in general, should they feel that there's some movement towards this? Is that
I'll probably pass this to somebody else, Dr. Heather Brown, but I do know that there are several organizations and support groups, and you definitely want to have a good, open communication and relationship with that girl or woman. I didn't talk to my mom. I hid, like she was talking about, everything inside, and I would have lied if I was asked a question that could have directed me towards needing help. So if there's an open relationship and a good communication between somebody that the young woman or young girl trusts, that's usually a big key factor, because she'll generally open up about her feelings. She'll talk about her feelings, which can lead to hopefully helping her get help. But I think.
Yeah, I will say many of the girls serving organizations here in Charlotte do have curricula that address body image issues. Girl Scouts body image is very important with them. Girls Rock Charlotte, Girl Talk Foundation, and everyone deals with the topic in slightly different ways, so find the one that fits best for you and your family. If you want to go to a more anonymous source, there's the National Eating Disorders Association online that has a tremendous amount of materials, as well as additional resources they can refer you to. And certainly I will say, if you are open to it, well, be open to it. Go see a social worker or psychologist, or a psychologist who deals with body image, body dysmorphia. I can certainly say from personal experience, I spent a good year in therapy with the wonderful Dr. Sid, who really helped me with dealing with some of those body image issues. And just by being that open, non-judgmental source, asking good questions and helping me sort of work through things. He offered a sliding scale. I was a poor student at the time, and it made all the difference in my life. So.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so here's the next question, because so we've talked about the eating disorder side of things, but then we know that a lot of the behaviors that our youth are experiencing also come from, again, we were talking about the mindset. And so, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of pressure, there's just so much our young people are dealing with, well, let alone our young people, we as adults. We have stresses coming from all different factors, and so mental health is becoming a very huge discussion, just nationally and internationally. So what would you say are some of the top causes of anxiety and depression in our young girls, as outside of just dealing with the body image thing, but what are some other stressors that are affecting our young ladies?
I don't know. I think it could be a wide variety of things. I think that the whole phenomenon of social media, I think it goes back to what I was talking about, is just perception is not reality, and just always comparing yourself to other people. I think that nowadays is a huge source of anxiety, just always trying to figure out how can I meet that standard. I know a lot of people get almost addicted to how many likes did I get, on this post, right? That becomes an obsession for some people, constantly checking, constantly seeing, okay, well, what kind of pictures do I post that get more likes versus this type of picture? And I think that actually can cause a lot of anxiety and worry in young girls. I think the social media phenomenon also opens up for cyberbullying, whatever that might look like. I know that's huge in the school systems nowadays, so that would be my take now.
I think it also starts in the home. I have 2 boys, and even though I have 2 boys and they're very athletic and they're underweight, they have high metabolisms, I have to be very conscious of what I say and how I say things, because even though I have overcome that distorted body image, I too sometimes can't fit in my skinny girl jeans and they're tight. So the language that I say at home and around my children and the way that I perceive myself is going to reflect in my family, because we're the most comfortable at home, right? With the people that we love, that's where we take the mask off and things filter from the home into the school. And if we have young girls, praising them as much as you possibly can and loving on them and emphasizing to them what you love about them and what their attributes are physically that you love about them, so that they start to love themselves and they develop that confidence. Because then, again, the BBA, if they walk down the hall and they feel like they're not comparing to the girl in the tight jeans or the short shorts or the model body, she still feels like, I'm confident, I'm comfortable, I have self-esteem and self-confidence, and I love myself, and I look good. And I think that that starts in the home and then filters with and without social media, because that's a whole nother beast.
I'll totally agree with that. I think early life experiences, like I talked about, play a big role. The messages that they get, and often it's not sort of explicit things, but there are things that we don't say, that we don't offer, because life kind of, I mean, it's busy. I have a lot of folks that I work with who are working a few jobs, and they do have to leave their children home a little longer, and you're sort of left to your own sort of devices sometimes when you're a little kid. You don't have an adult there to sort of redirect those thoughts. And so what I always think about, and I'm sure in your communities you see this, there's a need for mentoring, there's a need for people to reach out to young girls who might not have those role models, to sort of feed them more positive information. So I think that plays a big role, you know, those early moments where we're forming ideas about ourselves and the world. That plays a big role.
All right. A lot of this is personal to me, myself. I have 4 children, but you know, you learn with multiple children, each of them is so unique, right? None of them are alike. So I had one of my eldest daughter who suffers, has issues with anxiety, or had issues, and was a self-mutilator. Can anyone speak to that and explain what that is? Because that's also a byproduct of mental health issues. So can someone explain to our audience so that they know that this is something that's real as well?
Yes, it's kind of similar. It could be similar to an eating disorder where you're trying to control in some way, and it all goes back to the emotional experience being so unbearable that I will inflict pain on myself so that my attention can now be on the physical pain. So I don't have to focus on the emotional pain. And you know, we talked about how no one wants to talk about shame, no one wants to talk about those negative emotions. It feels better if I can just bury them and not feel them. So I'd rather feel the physical pain, or I'd rather exercise or binge or purge. So that's usually where self-mutilation comes into play.
And explain to them what that is, self-mutilation.
Self-mutilation, it can be a lot of different things. I have worked with individuals who might pull their hair. If you've ever seen that, some people will cut themselves, whether it's on their thigh or on their leg. You're exercising to the point of pain. So many different ways that people can, and usually one way to help that, in therapy at least, is we try to give them, another coping mechanism to put in the place of cutting yourself or burning yourself or pulling your hair out. So sometimes we'll say, okay, we'll take a lemon wedge and put it in your mouth, right? And focus on what that feels like. But then it also goes back to, do they have a safe place where they can talk about the emotions? Do they have a safe environment where they can feel like they can be vulnerable and share that experience so they don't have to resort to self-mutilation?
Personally, I've been a puller. So when someone says they're a puller, that means they pull their hair. And there's actually a term for that. It's called trichotillomania. And so what she was talking about with the pulling of hair, a lot of that for me personally, and for thousands of women who have struggled with eating disorders that I've interacted with over the past 2 decades, is that there's anxiety. and the anxiety is hidden. And the way that I used to deal with that was I would eat, and then to get rid of it, I would purge. So then when I stopped doing that, I had to fidget in some way. Well, fidget spinners are out now, right? But I had to fidget in some way, and so I would pull, and not even realizing it, I would pull and pull and pull, and sometimes end up with some bald spots on my head that didn't realize that had been there, but I would just pull so much. So if somebody is doing something to harm themselves, it may be starting something simple as you're seeing them just pull their hair out, not necessarily taking a knife to cutting their skin or poking or harming themselves that way, but it is mutilating, and it is more of an anxiety driven, but there's usually something going on that they're not dealing with, and they're utilizing that as a mechanism to cope.
Yeah, so the reason I'm pulling these things for you all is because, again, if you've not been in this world of these type of issues, I want you to have more specifics as to what these disorders really are. There's one last one I'd like us to touch on, again, because of personal experience. This same daughter, who was a self-mutilator, woke up one morning on a Wednesday morning to get ready for school at 6 o'clock and could not get out of the bed. And she literally could not move her legs. And so we had to call 911. Long story short, we ended up in Levine's Children's Hospital for a month, and my child could not walk. And so she had something called conversion disorder. And so the doctor explained it to me. He says, there are times when our body, our mind, can become so inundated with stress that it literally shuts a system down in our body. So she was so full of anxiety in her mind that it shut down her mobility, and that is possible. So I had a whole education I had to get on that, but the best way the doctor described it, it's like a light switch, right? So something switched off in her mind that caused her, that affected her physically, right? So they had to do psychotherapy, physical therapy combined to get the light switch to flick back on up here, so that then they could work on getting her mobility back. And what the doctor explained is that could take weeks, months, years. It's just dependent on when this gets right, okay? So I'm bringing these things up because there's just a lot of impact with stress and depression. I myself suffer from anxiety and depression issues, and so that getting the help that is needed for our children, for ourselves, so that we can be healthy up here, not that we can get rid of necessarily all the stress factors, but learning how to cope better is really the key and the point of what we're dealing with here today. Thank you all so much. Did you all enjoy that discussion? Okay.
I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to say, I think sometimes we get into the habit of thinking that eating disorders, some of these anxieties, are a middle school age girl issue or when you're in high school. And I think sometimes we forget that even as adult women, we still struggle with a lot of this stuff. And that's, again, where shame can come from. Oh, I'm 32 years old. I should be over this by now. You know, I was struggling with this when I was 12. Why do I still have this issue? So even for adult women, a lot of these issues are still there, and that is very normal. Again, that's why I think the discussion like this needs to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So now we're going to open up our discussion, because I know now you all's minds are going to be, got questions. So we're going to open up for question and answer session. And so who would like to kick us off? Yes, John. Yeah, I'm going to actually bring this down to you.
I was taking notes, and I definitely like what you had to say, the Fight Club lady. I wanted to just be very open and honest and transparent, and I really hate that I have to say this, but I'm going to say this, you know, for the last couple of months, I have been actually walking around with a body shaper on every single day. In the morning times, in the night times, when I'm going out to different places or whatever, having it on. then I am eating, vegetables, drinking alkaline water, yogurt and stuff like that, because when I was a child, I was told that I was ugly. I was told that I was never gonna be anything, and I think, like she said, you have to be very open and honest and transparent, because a lot of you all are looking like, oh, you're pretty. But when you have been told for such a long time that you don't look like the cultural standards of society, you deal with that. So I said, well, before I go and just talk, let me just tell my truth. So after today, I will not be having on a body shaper, because that's crazy. I'm so glad I have on today, but I didn't want to get up here and say, okay, well, then I have my body shaper on, so I definitely want to be open and honest and transparent. But one of the things I wanted to ask the panel is, you talked about something very important. You said, our culture sets the stage for our unrealistic standards. And for me, it's very oxymoron, because in the dating world, you know, when you look like I look, and then you have men who are not in the best shape, they say to you that you're not thin enough, that you're not pretty enough, that then society makes it okay for the men to look a certain way, obesity-wise or unhealthy-wise, because they have money. So when you're a single woman looking like I look, and then you are trying to date and you have a man that is not healthy, how does that help you? Because it's like on one way you're pretty, but in the dating world you're not pretty enough, but then the person that you're dating, they're not even healthy. So my thing is, you know, how can we kind of balance that? Because it seems like women, we all have these unrealistic standards that the cultural society puts on us, but for men, in my world, it's not. So when someone from the audience kind of
But, because a lot of us, again, have these thoughts and feelings that manifest from different things that might have happened in our lives. So there's not one broad answer. But I will say that working on self-love, what I always recommend to people is to find someone to talk to, a therapist, so you can pull back the layers and really understand why certain things are impacting you the way they are. But for me, what I like to talk about is sort of finding the happiness and appreciation for yourself, like I said earlier. It's not dependent on someone else, because we'll always get that feedback. We're always at risk of sort of running into the person who is sort of wanting to pull us down or talk very negatively about who we are. You get it in society, you hear, there are definitely different standards for men and women in terms of how we have to look and appear. That will always be there. But for me, what helps us to overcome that is when our sense of self is secure and grounded. Okay, and that's often what I try to shift the spotlight to in therapy. We can talk for ages about other people and what they'll say to us, but again, if I'm sound, if I have the confidence to turn to me, then it would be hard for someone else to come with the negativity and take me off of where I'm going. And so I think it's so beneficial to meet with a therapist, meet with a counselor, meet with your friends, having healthy people in your life that can remind you how awesome you are. Then when the folks that come around that aren't so healthy, you have more confidence to say, no, I don't need you right now. And set that boundary. The only way someone's coming in to a boundary I set is if I open it. And so, that was.
My question has to do with the anorexia with young children. If you have a young middle school age child, it's actually a friend of my daughter's, who seems to be adverse to food, and she'll be at my house for 2 days, and she's, well, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry. And she never wants to eat. If you're in the beginning stages of something like this, is there something you can do to help curb that tendency, or to work towards that, or to change that view?
I'll just exposure to a healthy lifestyle is, I think, one of the most important things we can do as women and as parents and friends. So if there's a lot of healthy choices that are out there, fruits and vegetables, the things that are good and taste good that are good for us, the body does starve. And they can get starving and hungry and want to eat something and want to grab for something that's there. The last thing that you want to do is you need to eat something. You need to eat something. You need to eat something. I haven't seen you eat anything in a day or two, or you need to eat something. And the pressing and the hounding nature that sometimes we tend to do because we care can push that person to the opposite extreme where they want to then eat nothing. In my opinion, the more exposure you can have for that overall lifestyle, like healthy lifestyle choices, or let's go for a walk, let's go exercise. If somebody exercises when they're done, they're hungry. So their metabolism is raising, they're burning calories, they're hungry, they need to eat to nourish their body. And here's the thing, if you're not nourishing your body nutritionally with food, you're not nourishing your mind. You get foggy, you can't focus, you can't concentrate. So the more exposure we can have to healthy lifestyle choices, and that's hydration versus non-sugary drinks. You know, good healthy choice foods from the ground, fruits and vegetables versus all those prepackaged processed things that are gonna have an adverse effect that's gonna make a child or a woman hyper and turn around and burn the calories and things like that. But without being a counselor, being observant and having that open communication with the child or the parent in the relationship, sometimes the reason they're withdrawing is because something's going on in their feelings and they're not choosing to eat it, or maybe they feel self-conscious of what's being offered. You never know what's going on at home. When I was 13, my mom went everything fat-free, skim, low fat, no fat, and she started working out like a fiend doing aerobics. That was at that time that my disordered body image started kicking in. I was watching mom, and my mom didn't realize she was taking care of herself, but her choices were influencing the household with different things. When I start to grab regular milk, oh, you need the skim. Oh, I do? Why? Well, because that one has more fat. Oh, okay. And so it's like the choices that we start to make are going to impact the other people that are around us. Living by example, I think, is the biggest thing that we can do. Lead by example in every way that we possibly can, as if somebody was always watching.
My name is Latonya Chambers, and I'm with the Lounge today. But my question is directed towards Dr. Keisha. I do have a niece, well, I call her my niece, and she's just plump, fat, and round. And she don't like the way her body looks, and she wishes, as a young girl, she could change the way she eats. So as an auntie, well, kind of auntie, what advice can I give her or other young elementary students that doesn't like their bodies and the way they look at that age? Because I do volunteer a lot in the elementary schools. So what advice as a friend to them I can give?
I don't think you got what you said, but what I always talk about with younger girls especially is having an open discussion. One that's not almost so much as advice giving, but just one that wants to understand, because there could be a lot of different things that are contributing to that. And sometimes in our passion and desire to help, we just jump right in with all of this advice. And sometimes we have to understand the backstory. Maybe what is she telling herself? What are the thoughts? You know, I like when young kids like that start to journal, because sometimes that'll open up a greater understanding for you about what's really going on up there to cause this behavior. I also recommend, even if you know the parent or if you have access to, again, speaking with someone who specializes in that, sometimes we tell ourselves it's not bad enough, but it could be a very simple conversation about some of the symptoms and some of the difficulties or thoughts that this kid has that can really help her. And also modeling, you know, I like that idea of just showing a healthy way to live to younger kids, because more than sort of the preaching part of it, they're watching us, and I think that those are where those small messages start to get into their minds, and they start to absorb it and run with it. And so exposing her to different kid groups, going out with her to do
First of all, I think you ladies did a great job. I've learned a lot here, just listening to everything you had to say about healthy thinking. And you talked about overcoming adversaries and developing a healthier thinking, you know, having a healthier mind. A lot of times, you know, we can surround ourselves with people who think healthy, people who are not negative, people who are more positive in our lives. But a lot of the negative thinking can be a cultural thing. And when it's cultural, that's something that is hard to deal with, especially with our families. You can be, your families can be surrounded by a lot of people with negative thinking and who are extremely judgmental, you know, when it comes to body images. So when you're around those family members, you know, you can teach your children, you know, healthy thinking and about healthy body images. But when you have to go and visit family members who are in this community, where it's a cultural thing to be so judgmental when it comes to body images, how do you deal with that? How do you respond to that? Because that is something, you know, it's not just one person you have to deal with, but the entire community. And when you and your child or children are visiting people within that cultural environment, how do you respond to that? What would be your suggestion?
I think it's always tough when you're talking about family. I think, because we can't choose who our family is, right? But I think it goes back to what Dr. Smith was talking about, is you do have a choice. We can't choose our family, but we do have a choice what energy we're allowing into our sphere, right? So even if it is a family member, if I know that I'm trying to instill this positive thinking and emotion into my child or into myself, maybe it's not the best time for me. Maybe I can love you from far away. You know, maybe I don't visit you as often. Maybe I make more phone calls or make the visit brief. But I think it goes back to what is your sense of self? How can I instill those positive affirmations into myself and into my children, so that when we do go, they know, okay, listen, this is what you might hear, but remember these positive affirmations about yourself. But even though it's family, you can still decide what